My name is Lauren Bennett. I am 34 years old, and my family thinks I dispatch freight at night for barely enough money to cover rent. They do not know I own Crestline Distribution Group, a $2.7 billion logistics empire. I kept it private because every achievement became my brother's spotlight or my parents' property. On Christmas Eve, they invited me to celebrate his new CEO job and $324,000 salary, but the invitation told me to arrive early. I knew dinner was not the only plan. I wore a coat, carried a work bag, and drove my 10-year-old car because I wanted to see how they treated the woman they believed was broke. The moment I walked through the door, every jaw was about to drop, but not for the reason they expected. Before I tell you what was waiting beside my plate, tell me where you are watching from and what evening you are having. My mother inspected my coat, warned me not to embarrass guests, then covered a stack of job applications. "We will discuss your future after dinner," she said. 10 minutes later, every seat at the table was occupied, and the celebration began as though I had been invited only to provide contrast. My older brother, Brandon Bennett, sat beneath a gold banner that read, "Congratulations, CEO." He wore a new watch and explained that Meridian Medical Supply had appointed him Chief Executive Officer at a salary of $324,000 a year. My mother, Denise Bennett, repeated the number. My father, Gregory Bennett, raised his glass and said the family finally had a leader with the discipline to carry our name forward. Brandon added that Meridian had leased him a company vehicle and that he and his wife were considering a house in Wayzata once his first bonus arrived. Before dessert, Brandon passed his phone around to show the leased SUV and a listing for the Wayzata house. Denise praised the stone entryway. Gregory said executives needed homes that signaled credibility. When the phone reached me, Brandon said, "Do not worry, Lauren. We are going to help you become presentable too." His wife, Allison Bennett, sat beside him in a cream suit and accepted every compliment as though she had negotiated the appointment herself. She was Meridian's chief financial officer, and my parents treated their marriage as proof Brandon had chosen correctly in every area of life. "A CEO and a CFO at the same table," Denise said. "That is what ambition looks like." Then she asked whether my terminal still gave employees discounts on vending machine food. My aunt, Kelly Dawson, wanted to know my hourly rate. Her husband, Todd Dawson, asked whether freight dispatching required training or whether people simply answered phones until a truck arrived. I said the work required judgment, timing, and knowledge of routes. Todd laughed and called that a careful description of using a headset. Kelly asked how much my apartment cost, whether I had health insurance, and whether my landlord had fixed the heat. They did not wait for complete answers. Each question supported a case they had already built. I told them I was managing. Gregory compared my life to Brandon's. "Your brother understands that careers are built by taking responsibility," he said. "You keep choosing jobs that let you disappear." I could have told him my decisions affected freight moving through 22 states, that hospitals depended on our refrigerated network, and that more than 14,000 employees received paychecks from the company I founded. Instead, I asked Brandon what Meridian planned next. He announced that Crestline Distribution Group had invited Meridian to a final presentation on December 26. Meridian wanted a multi-year distribution agreement covering medical supplies for regional hospitals, and Brandon claimed Crestline had approached him because his reputation had reached its board. I knew the truth. Meridian had requested the meeting 5 times. Crestline agreed only because hospital clients wanted a secondary supplier in case of shortages. Brandon had been given one controlled opportunity to prove his company was stable. Allison's fingers tightened around her fork when he said Crestline's name. She described Meridian's inventory controls as among the strongest in the industry, but she looked toward Brandon before answering questions about the review. Gregory said Crestline's anonymous founder was the kind of person young executives should study: disciplined, ethical, self-made, and strategic. Denise said the founder never gave interviews because serious people did not need attention. Brandon nodded, then explained how his leadership had probably impressed someone at Crestline. Allison asked whether I understood what a contract of that size could mean. It could change Meridian, I said, only if the numbers are real. Her expression sharpened. Brandon interrupted and said Crestline occupied a renovated rail terminal in St. Paul. Since I supposedly worked around freight buildings, he wanted me to guide everyone from the parking entrance to reception. Denise had decided the family should attend because Brandon's success belonged to all of them. I agreed because I wanted to hear what he planned to represent inside my boardroom. When dinner paused and I carried dishes toward the kitchen, I heard Denise speaking with Kelly near the pantry. She said each person had been assigned a subject for the conversation after dessert: employment, housing, retirement, relationships, and personal responsibility. Kelly asked whether Brandon's solution was ready. Denise answered, "The assistant contract is printed. Lauren will sign it tonight, and then she can finally learn how a real company operates." After the plates were cleared, my mother moved everyone into the living room. The chairs were arranged in a semicircle facing the couch, so the discussion had been planned before my invitation was mailed. Denise placed me in the center and sat beside Gregory with a folder across her knees. Brandon and Allison took the armchairs. Kelly and Todd sat near the fireplace, while my grandmother, Marjorie Bennett, remained at the edge of the room with both hands around her cane. Denise said nobody wanted me to feel attacked. "This is an intervention motivated by concern," she said. "We love you too much to watch you waste another year." Gregory opened a financial planning folder containing a sample budget, a debt worksheet, and a page titled Adult Accountability Agreement. He had estimated my income, rent, groceries, and transportation without asking for a bank statement. The numbers were wrong, but his certainty was more revealing than the errors. He said I had no retirement strategy, property, professional network, or realistic path toward security. Kelly slid another packet onto the coffee table. It contained apartment listings near my parents', resume templates, and applications for office coordinator positions. Several forms already had my name typed across the top. "These places are respectable," she said. "You could stop pretending dispatching is a career." Todd said I should sell my car before it became a burden. He offered to list it online and said I might get enough for a bus pass and emergency savings. Nobody asked whether the car was reliable, whether I liked my apartment, or whether I already invested. They were not collecting information. They were assigning a life. Kelly asked whether I had dated anyone serious, because loneliness explained my lack of direction. Denise added relationships to the monitoring plan and suggested family dinners each week. I said nothing, but the contract now looked less like employment than legal permission to control me. Brandon placed a black folder in front of me. Inside was an employment contract from Meridian Medical Supply. My name, proposed start date, and salary were entered. I would resign from the freight terminal and become Brandon's executive assistant for $42,000 a year. My duties included managing his calendar, arranging travel, preparing personal appointments, coordinating family events, and completing additional tasks at the CEO's discretion. "This is your way out," he said. "You will finally see how a serious company operates." I asked whether he had considered what I wanted. Gregory answered, "Your choices have not earned this family's confidence. When someone offers structure, gratitude is appropriate." Brandon said he needed the contract signed before the Crestline meeting because arriving with a new assistant would make his executive office look established. I asked why the position included family errands. Denise smiled. "Successful families support each other." Allison cleared her throat and placed one hand over her stomach. She announced that she was pregnant. Denise cried. Gregory embraced Brandon, and Kelly discussed names before Allison finished speaking. I congratulated them because the child had nothing to do with the adult's behavior. Within minutes, my mother returned to the contract. She said I could move into Brandon and Allison's guest room, help after the baby arrived, and save money while the family monitored my spending. Allison pretended to hesitate. "Lauren should have her own life," she said, "but her schedule is not demanding, and someone familiar would be useful. The assistant position would make me subordinate to Brandon at work and unpaid help at home." Todd joked that changing diapers might teach me responsibility. Marjorie looked toward me, then toward Denise, but said nothing. Brandon pushed a pen across the table. "Sign tonight. I cannot take someone into Crestline who appears indecisive." I lifted the contract and saw another document beneath it. The heading contained my late grandfather's name and the words, "Bennett Family Trust." Before I could read further, Denise pulled it away and placed it under Gregory's folder. "That is unrelated." I asked why a trust document had been placed with my employment contract. Gregory told me not to create distractions. I set down the pen and said I would review the offer for one day. Brandon's face hardened. People without options should not negotiate as though they have leverage. Allison's phone rang. She left the room and closed the hallway door. When I went to retrieve my coat, I heard her say, "Change the inventory reserve. The lender cannot see the original warehouse valuation, and those numbers must be corrected before Crestline reviews them." The call ended. The door opened, and Allison found me standing close enough to have heard everything. A few minutes later, Allison followed me onto the back porch and closed the door behind us. She asked how much of the call I had heard. I said enough to recognize that she was changing financial information before a due diligence review. Her smile returned, but it had become careful. "You work in dispatch," she said. "Inventory reserves and collateral valuations are more complicated than they sound." I asked why complexity required hiding an original warehouse value from a lender. For the first time that evening, she stopped speaking to me like a child. She said companies adjusted estimates all the time, and that people without finance experience misunderstood routine corrections. Then she offered to help me find a better position at Meridian if I remained supportive of Brandon and did not create trouble before the Crestline meeting. I asked whether the better position also included changing diapers. Her jaw tightened. "Do not make problems for your brother because you are embarrassed about your own life." I did not threaten her or reveal anything. I answered, "Then your records should explain themselves." Allison went inside first. When I returned, Marjorie stood near the hallway with her coat buttoned. She asked me to help find a box in the garage. Denise barely looked up because she assumed my grandmother needed someone to carry it. In the garage, Marjorie opened her purse and placed a brass key in my palm. It belonged to a safe deposit box at a bank near downtown St. Paul. "Your grandfather left something for you," she said. I asked why she had waited until that night. She said she had spent years hoping my parents would correct what they had done without forcing the family into court. My grandfather had left me a minority interest in a commercial parcel beside the old St. Paul rail terminal. At the time, it was neglected property with storage buildings and cracked pavement. After logistics companies expanded through the district, the land became valuable. Marjorie said Denise and Gregory later claimed I had signed a disclaimer transferring my interest to a Bennett family holding company. She had seen the signature and never believed it was mine. I asked what the holding company had done with the land. The company had pledged the parcel as collateral for a Meridian expansion loan that helped Brandon's division grow and strengthened his path to the CEO position. "Your father said you agreed because Brandon had a future and you did not," Marjorie said. My parents had converted that judgment into a financial decision and used my inheritance to support the child they considered worthy. Marjorie said the box contained trust records and correspondence my grandfather's attorney had sent before his death. She apologized for remaining silent. I said I would decide what the documents meant after I saw them. I did not tell her that Crestline already owned most of the surrounding terminal property, or that the disputed parcel sat inside a redevelopment plan our board had delayed because of unclear title records. When I left, Denise called after me that the assistant offer would expire the next day. Brandon reminded me to meet them at Crestline on December 26. I drove to the modest apartment I kept for private visits and opened a secure laptop. A message waited in Crestline's whistleblower portal from Megan Fletcher, Meridian's internal audit manager. She reported inflated warehouse assets, duplicate vendor payments, inventory recorded at locations where it did not exist, and pressure from Allison to alter reports. Megan had preserved emails, board materials, and revision histories. Her message also stated that Brandon had received at least one warning and told her to postpone the issue until after his CEO appointment. I called Rachel Sloan, Crestline's chief operating officer, and summarized the call and Megan's evidence. Rachel asked whether I wanted to cancel Meridian's presentation. No, I said. Let them make every representation on the record. She agreed to begin an independent review, preserve all submitted files, and arrange for outside counsel, board members, and Meridian's lender to observe remotely. On Christmas morning, I used Marjorie's key to open the safe deposit box. Inside were the original trust, a copy of the alleged disclaimer, and letters between Gregory and a family attorney. The disclaimer had been notarized on a date when I was attending college in Oregon. My transcripts, dorm records, and campus employment schedule could prove I was more than 1,500 miles away. I photographed every page, sealed the originals back inside their envelope, and immediately sent encrypted copies to Rachel and Crestline's outside counsel that morning. One letter warned that the signature might not survive examination. Another, written by Gregory, said the transfer should remain unquestioned because Meridian needed the collateral. The final sentence was underlined twice. Meridian's lender must never learn that Lauren Bennett still held a legal claim to the property. By sunrise on December 26, the roads were clear. I dressed in a navy suit, fastened my hair, and placed the same old coat over everything before leaving. Crestline's St. Paul headquarters occupied a renovated rail terminal with a public reception desk, a loading control center, an operations floor, and an executive conference level above the original platforms. Nothing about it was secret. Trucks entered through marked gates, employees crossed the lobby with badges, and visitors checked in beneath a directory carrying the company name. I arrived before 7 and met Rachel in the main boardroom. She told me Crestline's independent directors, outside counsel, and a representative from Meridian's lender would attend by secure video. Megan had agreed to join from a protected location. Our review team had compared Meridian's presentation files with earlier submissions and preserved every change. I gave one instruction. Nobody would expose the discrepancies until Brandon and Allison completed their claims. They would be allowed to describe Meridian's inventory, collateral, and controls without interruption, and every answer would be recorded. At 8:30, the Bennett family entered the lobby together. Denise had insisted they attend because Brandon's strong family foundation would impress Crestline. Brandon wore a dark overcoat and carried a leather presentation case. Allison walked beside him with a laptop bag and a rigid expression. Gregory, Denise, Kelly, and Todd followed as though they were arriving for an awards ceremony. They found me waiting near reception in my old coat. Brandon looked relieved. "Good. You made it," he said. He handed me the leather case. "Carry this upstairs and stay close in case I need something." I took it because I wanted the moment documented exactly as it happened. Allison leaned toward me and said, "Do not speak during the meeting unless someone asks you a direct question. This is not the place to prove you understand business." Denise added that I was not to mention the intervention, my job problems, or my hesitation about Brandon's offer. "Today is about him," she said. The receptionist, who knew me well, looked from the family to me and asked, "Is the executive level ready for you, Ms. Bennett?" I answered, "I will join them shortly." Brandon interpreted the exchange as routine courtesy and told everyone Crestline trained even front desk employees to be unusually formal. We passed the loading control center, where live screens tracked refrigerated shipments across the Midwest. Todd whispered that the operation looked more complicated than my terminal. I did not answer. In the elevator, Brandon rehearsed his opening while Denise corrected the angle of his tie. Gregory reminded Allison to emphasize the collateral, and she answered too quickly that the title was clean. Kelly asked whether employees like me were allowed above the operations floor. Brandon said Crestline was making an exception because I was part of his support team for that day. On the conference level, Rachel greeted Meridian's group and directed the family to their seats. I remained along the side wall while Brandon took the presentation position. He introduced himself as Meridian's new chief executive officer and described the company as financially stable, operationally disciplined, and ready for a long-term partnership. He said current inventory levels could support Crestline's hospital network without interruption. He stated that Meridian's collateral was unchallenged, its warehouse valuations were conservative, and its internal controls had been independently tested. Allison confirmed that the numbers in the presentation were complete and accurate. She explained that recent adjustments reflected normal accounting updates, not changes in underlying conditions. Rachel asked whether any lender, auditor, or internal employee had raised unresolved concerns about inventory or vendor payments. Allison said no. Brandon added that he had personally corrected management weaknesses inherited from the prior administration. He said his promotion proved Meridian's board trusted his judgment. Gregory then asked permission to speak as a representative of the Bennett family holding company. He described the St. Paul parcel supporting Meridian's expansion as properly transferred, fully controlled, and free from competing claims. Denise told the people on the screens that Brandon had always been honest, focused, and responsible. Kelly said his family had watched him earn every step. Todd called him the safest executive in the room. I watched the lender's representative take notes. Brandon continued by saying Crestline had approached Meridian because its anonymous founder recognized leadership. He promised that under his direction, Meridian would become Crestline's most reliable medical supply partner. When the presentation ended, Rachel asked, "Have Meridian and its representatives now completed all material statements concerning inventory, controls, collateral, and executive knowledge?" Allison looked at Brandon. Brandon said, "Yes, everything relevant has been disclosed." Rachel turned toward me. "Ms. Bennett, would you take your seat at the head of the table?" I crossed the room and placed Brandon's presentation case beside the chair. He stepped in front of me and gave a strained laugh. "Lauren, she means someone from Crestline. Sit back down." Security remained near the door without moving because every officer in the building recognized me. Rachel touched the control panel. The main screen changed to Crestline Distribution Group, Office of the Founder. Beneath it appeared my name and title, Lauren Bennett, founder and majority owner. Rachel faced Meridian's delegation. "For the record," she said, "I am introducing Crestline's founder and controlling shareholder." Brandon remained standing with one hand extended toward the chair that belonged to me. No one spoke until I sat down and placed Brandon's unsigned assistant contract beside his presentation. His hand lowered slowly. Denise stared at the screen, then at my coat, as if one of them had to be false. Gregory removed his glasses and wiped them even though the lenses were clean. Kelly whispered my name. Todd looked toward the door. Allison did not move. I opened the contract to the page showing my salary and duties. 40 hours ago, I said, this family tried to hire Crestline's founder as Brandon's executive assistant for $42,000 a year. Denise found her voice first. She said the intervention had been motivated by love and that they could only act on the information I had given them. I asked one question. Would any of this have been acceptable if I truly were a struggling dispatcher? Nobody answered. Brandon said I had deceived them for years. I told him I had kept private information private. They had invented the rest without asking me. They decided I was irresponsible, uninsured, lonely, and incapable. They prepared contracts, housing rules, spending controls, and unpaid childcare based on that story. You did not need my financial statements to treat me with basic respect, I said. Allison interrupted and argued that family issues had nothing to do with Meridian's proposal. Then we will discuss Meridian, I said. Rachel displayed a comparison of the financial files submitted across the previous 6 weeks. Megan appeared by secure video and identified herself as Meridian's internal audit manager. She explained that several inventory entries represented products that did not exist at the listed warehouses. Some cereal groups appeared in 2 locations at once. Vendor contracts had been revised after approval, and duplicate payments had been routed through North River Advisory, a consulting company owned by Allison's cousin. Allison called Megan a resentful employee who misunderstood executive corrections. Rachel displayed the original emails, approval logs, and document revision history. One message from Allison instructed accounting staff to maintain the higher inventory figure until after Crestline signed. Another told a controller to classify consulting payments as emergency procurement support. Megan then showed the warning she had sent to Brandon. It described unsupported inventory, related party payments, and the risk that Meridian's collateral package included property the company might not legally control. Brandon admitted he had seen the message, but he said Allison assured him the issues were technical. A board packet appeared on the screen. Its agenda history showed that Brandon had ordered Megan's report removed from a meeting 2 days before his CEO appointment. His written explanation said the discussion could create unnecessary instability during leadership succession. I told him he might not have designed the scheme, but he knowingly prevented scrutiny because scrutiny threatened the title he wanted. Brandon looked at Allison and asked why she had told him the report was routine. She said he had wanted the appointment and had made his own decision. Gregory stood and said the property allegation was baseless. I removed the original trust from a sealed evidence envelope and placed it before outside counsel. The next screen showed the disputed disclaimer, the notarization date, my college records from Oregon, and Gregory's correspondence with the family attorney. The lender's representative asked whether Gregory had written that Meridian must never learn I retained a legal claim. Gregory said the words had been taken out of context. Marjorie, who had joined remotely with assistance from her attorney, confirmed that my grandfather intended the interest for me and that she never believed I signed it away. Denise began crying. She said they believed Brandon needed the land more because he had ambition, a family, and a corporate future. Lauren, you were drifting, she said. We thought the property would be wasted. I asked whether theft became responsible planning when parents preferred one child. She said they had meant to protect the family. The lender's representative stated that its legal and fraud teams would immediately review the collateral documents. Crestline's outside counsel instructed Meridian's delegation to preserve devices, messages, and records. Rachel announced that Crestline rejected the proposed partnership. On one of the remote screens, Meridian's independent directors called an emergency session. They placed Brandon on administrative leave pending investigation and removed Allison's access to financial systems. Allison said the board was overreacting and that Megan had manipulated incomplete files. The directors ordered Meridian's technology team to preserve every version. Brandon accused Allison of using him. Allison replied that he had signed every executive certification and suppressed the warning himself. He turned toward Gregory and Denise and said they had spent his entire life teaching him that the family would remove consequences as long as he remained successful. Denise asked me to pause the process and handle the matter privately. I refused. Employee jobs, lender funds, and hospital supply contracts are involved. This stopped being private when false records were used outside your house. Gregory asked whether Crestline would save Meridian for Brandon's sake. I said Crestline would offer temporary supply support directly to Meridian's hospital customers, so patients and workers were not punished for executive conduct. Crestline would not rescue Meridian's owners, officers, or family investors. Denise tried to apologize, but I stopped her. This is not family counseling. This is a due diligence record. I handed Gregory formal notice that my attorneys would challenge the property transfer and seek restrictions against any further pledge or sale. Brandon finally sat down. He asked whether I had planned the entire humiliation from Christmas Eve. I planned a business review, I said. You and the family supplied the humiliation yourselves. For the first time, Brandon looked less angry at me than terrified of the person now sitting beside him. Rachel received a new encrypted file from Megan and opened it. The screen displayed an unreleased email Allison had written to her cousin. It said that once Crestline signed, she would blame all irregularities on Brandon, resign immediately, and leave him holding the certifications. The consequences began before the family reached the parking lot. Meridian's board completed an emergency vote and terminated Allison for cause. The company disabled her access, retained outside investigators, notified its insurer and lenders, and filed a civil claim seeking recovery of unauthorized payments. Investigators began reviewing whether altered records or false collateral documents had been transmitted to financial institutions. No one in that room could declare what criminal authorities might decide, and I did not pretend a presentation was a courtroom. Brandon remained on administrative leave until the board completed its review. 3 weeks later, Meridian removed him as chief executive officer after concluding that he had suppressed internal warnings, misrepresented due diligence, and failed to supervise the chief financial officer. Under his employment agreement, the company withdrew his compensation package, performance award, and leased vehicle. He and Allison separated. Their unborn child was never part of my response. The pregnancy did not excuse their decisions, and it did not deserve to become another weapon. Meridian continued under interim management while Crestline contracted directly with hospitals to prevent interrupted deliveries. Employees who had done honest work kept serving customers. Crestline also funded counseling and placement support for Meridian employees facing uncertainty. Megan received legal support under Meridian's whistleblower policy and later accepted a promotion to Director of Internal Controls. Her evidence helped the company distinguish operational problems from deliberate concealment. I filed a civil case concerning the land transfer. The court temporarily prohibited the parcel from being sold, pledged, or altered while ownership was reviewed. A document examiner concluded that the signature on the disclaimer was not mine. Faced with the trust, travel records, attorney correspondence, and handwriting analysis, Denise and Gregory agreed to restore the title, reimburse my legal expenses, and surrender all claims rather than continue the case. Their bank and professional contacts learned about the disputed collateral through required legal notices and lender reviews. I did not publish private records or create an online revenge campaign. The lawful record was enough. Kelly sent an apology that ended with a request for help refinancing her home. Todd wrote that families should not keep score and asked whether Crestline had a management position for him. I did not respond to either message. Brandon came to Crestline without an appointment 2 months after his removal. Security called my office, and I agreed to meet him in a conference room near the lobby. He looked thinner and arrived without the watch he had displayed at Christmas. He said the family was finally ready to acknowledge everything I had achieved. Then he asked me to invest in Meridian, protect his remaining shares, and help him maintain the Wayzata house he had purchased before the investigation. I told him they did not miss me. They missed the version of me they could control. Learning that I was wealthy did not erase what they chose to do when they believed I had nothing. You are asking me to restore your lifestyle, I said, not your conscience. He argued that I had tested the family by hiding my identity. I told him respect that survives only after evaluation is not respect. I gave him a letter from council requiring all future communication about the property, meridian, or money to go through attorneys. He left without another argument. Denise later mailed a box of family photographs and asked for another Christmas. I returned it unopened. Marjorie remained the only relative with whom I maintained limited contact because she had provided evidence without demanding forgiveness as payment. I did not erase her delay, but I recognized the difference between late truth and strategic apology. Several months later, after the title was restored, I transferred the recovered land into a workforce development foundation. We built paid training programs in logistics, refrigeration maintenance, freight dispatching, warehouse technology, and supply chain safety. I chose that purpose because my family had mocked the working people whose knowledge helped me build Crestline. At the opening ceremony, I spoke about skilled work, access, and dignity. I did not mention the Bennett family or celebrate their losses. Cutting contact was not an impulsive act of revenge. It was the final boundary after years of emotional and financial exploitation. My family believed money was the reason they should respect me. They were wrong. The moment that mattered was not when they learned what I owned. It was when I understood that I did not owe access to people who valued me only after discovering my price. Their apologies arrived after their power disappeared, and I was no longer willing to confuse regret with change. I did not leave them because I had become powerful. I left because I had finally stopped giving my power away.
Thank you for listening and watching until the final sentence. All situations in this story are fictional and made only for entertainment and reflection. We hope it reminds you that people who hurt you may expect you to stay unvaluable, forgiving, and easy to reach. But once you understand your worth, access to your life becomes something that must be earned with respect.